So I just want to thank everybody who has organized this. This is very wonderful. Thank you very much for inviting me to this program. It is really nicely done. So today I'm going to talk about deconstructing affirmative action, which is a highly charged topic. When I started researching this topic, I was unaware of how many facets there are to it. It is an incredibly complex, and it does evoke a lot of emotion in a lot of people when you start talking about it. Can I get the next slide?
Go backwards.
Backwards? Oh, sorry. So what is affirmative action? Affirmative action is best described as a series of policies designed to protect workers from discrimination. And while most of the talk today centers on affirmative action in higher ed, it actually was started by one of the presidents, Roosevelt, to protect workers in the workplace that had unionized and were therefore being kicked out of their jobs. The topic was broadened later by Truman, especially after he found a very bad racial incident which happened to a soldier. And that racial incident is here. This is Isaac Woodward. He was honorably discharged from the Army in 1942. He was highly decorated. He had received several different medals. He was traveling home after his discharge on a bus when he had an argument with the bus driver. He wanted to stop to use the restroom, and the bus driver was like, no. When they stopped at the next stop, the bus driver had called some of his friends, and the people came over and beat him brutally and blinded him for life. Not only did they do that, then they arrested him, and when he appeared in front of the judge, they charged him $50. So this is what life was like in the 40s and 50s. This prompted the president at the time, Truman, to start to really take a look at discriminative practices and really try to broaden the discussion beyond just federal contractors, which was where it was before, but to include all jobs and to make sure that there was no racial discrimination at all. Other presidents since then have come along to broaden the description to include gender bias, sexual preference bias, and women. So where are we now with affirmative action? At the heart of affirmative action, the goals are very simple. No one should be denied a job on the basis of race or ethnicity. Everyone should be allowed to have the same access to those positions. But the problem is in trying to define when you actually need affirmative action or when you're actually practicing affirmative action or not. So the rule of thumb is to say, if the surrounding community has this ethnic makeup, then your job should also have a similar ethnic makeup. And if it doesn't, then you need to ask why that is. On the other hand, so the goal then is if you have two people of the same skills, then you should try to pick those that will match the surrounding community. But what this does then is promote one ethnic group over another ethnic group. So the argument then becomes, is this in itself a form of racial discrimination? And that's where the controversy lies. It's also a problem for those of us in higher ed because the choosing practices that allow for admissions are not completely transparent. So there are lots of different ways in which people are allowed and admitted to universities and given preferential treatment. And this kind of illustrates it a little bit. The legacy admits, so those are daughters or sons of alums or big donors are given preferential treatment, and in some Ivy Leagues this can be as much as 40%. The soccer players, the athletes are also given preferential treatment. This can be as much as 30% of the population. Women have really benefited from affirmative action. It is predicted that by the year 2020, they will actually receive more of the bachelor's degrees than men at universities. And so the thing about these admits is that they're largely invisible. People don't notice if you're a legacy alum or if you're an athlete or even if you're a woman. But when you're a minority, that increase tends to stand out, and that's where people point their fingers. So you might ask, okay, now, and people will make this argument, the playing field is leveled. We have moved on. We are decades behind Isaac Woodward. But you can look at a variety of statistics. I'll show you this one. This is the latest statistics on unemployment. And you can see from this that Hispanics and blacks have a higher rate of unemployment than whites. And this data is from February of this year. And this is important to realize that these populations are smaller than the white population, but we're still more unemployed. So something is going on there. I actually don't believe that this difference that we're seeing is due to deliberate racist policies like it was in the past. I do think that what is going on is what we call unconscious bias, that we are just afraid to hire those people that don't look like us or that we're not familiar with. And this is a normal tendency to bring in those people that you know, that you're familiar, that you're comfortable with, that you think you'll be able to work with because you'll understand their culture, their customs, the way that they work. I think that affirmative action is the way to go because it will bring these cultures together, and I'm going to tell you how I've benefited from affirmative action, and it may not be in the way that you think. I was born in 1954, and in 1957, my family moved to a little place just north and east of Philadelphia called Concord Park. And we moved there. This Concord Park was an experiment created by a young developer and activist, Morris Milgram. This is Morris. It's very nerdy looking there. Morris was a campus radical. He was actually thrown out of City College because of his radical ideas. He protested an Italian fascist group there, and they threw him out of class and threw him off the campus. After that, he went to work for a socialist group in New Jersey, and while he was working there, he really honed his skills of fairness and the way he wanted people to be treated. His father-in-law hired him about a decade later to work with him, and his father-in-law was a developer. And while Morris learned how to build houses and how to set up developing areas, but he became disheartened because he realized they were only selling to whites and not to blacks. And when he asked about that, his father said, I sell to people that will buy, and the whites will buy. And so Morris wanted to do something else. He wanted to create a community where there was an interracial mix. So he went out and he had to raise money for this. And this took a while because there were not a lot of people who wanted to invest in this particular approach. The current dogma at the time was that if you allowed blacks into a neighborhood where there were whites, the property values would fall. And the argument for that is that once whites saw that there were blacks there, they would start to move out, and then more whites would not move in, and so eventually it would become all blacks, and then the property values would fall. But Morris didn't believe that, and he really wanted to sell to both populations of people. This is a picture of a graph that he made. I know you can't read the writing there, but the point is that the top line there, let's see if I can do this. I can't. The top line that's going up there is a line of the blacks that wanted to buy houses, and then the white line at the bottom is the line of the whites. So Morris was completely surprised by this, but he shouldn't have been. There were so few affordable houses in nice neighborhoods available to blacks that as soon as he allowed them to have this chance, everybody wanted to be there. So what Morris did then was he went back to his board. He had an interracial board that he bounced ideas off of. And he said to them, we have to do something or we're going to end up with an all-black community. And what they said to him was, all right, well, let's plan it out. Let's make sure that we sell a certain amount to whites and a certain amount to blacks. And so they came up with the quota of 55% whites, 45% blacks. Then they went back and had to convince people, the whites especially, to move into this neighborhood. And they did. A lot of the people who ended up living here were Quakers and had this ethic in their group. So the benefits were, we became a real community. Because we knew from the beginning that this was a planned community, we worked together as groups. The mothers didn't work at that time, so they had time to do things like organize progressive dinners. Do you remember? Does anybody here know what a progressive dinner is? Old people are shaking their head. Yeah. Okay, a progressive dinner is where you start at one house and you might have drinks and like appetizers. And then you move to the next house and have another course. And then you move to the next house and you'll have a third course. And then you'll move to the next house and have maybe dinner and dessert. And it's a way to visit several people's houses and kind of share the meal and keep the conversation going. We had lots of those. The parents would share babysitting duties. So one mother would gather all the children and another mother would be able to go out and shop. My mom opened a kindergarten, which I don't think she would have done in another community. And she felt empowered to do this because of where they were. We had parades. We had talent shows. We had a summer camp. And we all did this because we were a group of people who wanted to be together and wanted to work together. And so we had a real sense of community. The creativity was there too, and a sense of social justice in that we knew from our interactions that people were people under the skin and that we could get along with them. And some of the people that have left have been like me, a minority activist person, but some of us have left and become teachers and thereby spread the word that way. And then there's people who've become businessmen and stuff like that. But we all still have this sense of community. And our relationships have been maintained. This is me with my friend Becky and Marie. We grew up in Concord Park, and this picture was taken last Christmas. So we're still friends. We still see each other. And so that's very nice. Concord Park, unfortunately, did not last. As people moved out, my family moved out because we became too big for the house, and there was no way to build on it. And so several of the families moved out, and as they moved out, more and more blacks moved in, and now it's predominantly black. It's still there. I still drive by it, but it doesn't have that same racialness. So, in conclusion, the takeaway is that affirmative action can work, and it works very well if it's planned, if the groups agree to it, and it is a good way to get two groups to intermingle, especially if there's a sense of community and a sense of belonging. And that's my message.